This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this StockBox interview.
Well, today I'm joined by Scott Ellam, CEO of Connecting Excellence Group. Scott, it's great to have you back on. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Dan. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good. So there's been a couple of big developments since you last joined us. Let's start with the most recent, which is your trading update. So you reported year-on-year fee income growth of 20.3% at Spencer Riley. So that's your executive recruitment business, alongside a 13% increase in the average fee per placement. That all sounds very positive. So what's really driving that growth? Is it just a strong market environment, or is it more about the developments behind the business itself?
Yeah, well, I suppose the second half of the last calendar year was the first half of our business year. And that was a time when we were preparing for the IPO, and we IPO'd on December the 11th. So what drove that growth was the executive recruitment team focusing on their day-to-day mandates. And they are networking with partner level, vice president level, C-level candidates and clients to fill senior level, business critical, urgent and confidential positions across our traditional, if you like, client base, which is professional services, business advisory and consulting firms, logistics firms, construction engineering and AI and data intelligence firms. So I wouldn't say it was anything to do with the market. It's just we have quite clear processes in place. We deliver good results for clients, and we deliver good people into those businesses and good talent into those businesses. The business model is when we make a placement at that kind of level, we're typically charging a fee between £20,000 to £100,000 or dollars. 70% of our placements are done overseas. So it was a good year, given the fact that the senior leadership were very focused on an IPO. And then we've kicked on into this year and had the strongest January performance we've ever had to date, which was a £250,000 worth of net fee income in the first month of the year. And we have big plans going forward to keep driving that flywheel of operational growth in executive recruitment by attracting high billing talent and that complementing our Bitcoin Treasury strategy on the balance sheet side of the business.
Yeah, I mean, that record start to the year obviously is a good sign for the next 12 months or 10 months now. So you see that momentum continuing, do you, as that focus on, building your market presence and that focus among the executive team at your own business continues?
Yeah, well, the business model is the first time there's been a traditional people-based service business in executive recruitment that is designed and engineered to grow as a direct result of a Bitcoin Treasury strategy as well.
Yeah.
So there's two sides to the business that we're focused on. One is the operating side, generating more revenues and more cash flows. And the other side is the Bitcoin Treasury, which we will add Bitcoin to based on increase and free flowing cash flow, but also gives us access to the capital markets and access to raising capital through equity and also through our XE Bitcoin bonds. And on that side of the business, we have a team that are capital market specialists like Richard Byworth launching a hedge fund in Switzerland with 5,000 Bitcoin. Sam Roberts leading the first British pension fund allocation to Bitcoin. Our CFO Angus, who's been experienced in main market listings, and then VJ Selvum, who's ex-Goldman Sachs head of governance. So on the Bitcoin Treasury side of the business, we've built an extremely strong capital markets team to benefit from those periods where the capital markets are looking for access to businesses that are powered by Bitcoin. And you see on the operating side that we're now using a public limited status and the strength of that balance sheet, holding 52 Bitcoin at the moment, with ambition to get to 300, 500, 1,000 Bitcoin. The strength of that balance sheet and the PLC status makes the operating business very attractive to consultants or executive recruiters who are working for our direct competitors and generating revenue year on year. So the model is now that we can allow them to join our business or attract talent to join our business. And that talent then has aligned motivations where they want to drive operational revenue and cash flow growth. They benefit from performance-based share options that benefit them from the capital markets team's ability to increase the Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and also from the long-term compounding annual growth rate return that we expect in Bitcoin of over the next decade. We would anticipate as a base case 30% year-on-year compound annual growth rate in Bitcoin. So the more talent we attract to the operating business, the more revenue we can generate, and the more attractive the Bitcoin treasury side of the business becomes to the capital markets because it's backed by the operating business. So it's a different model and a dual flywheel model that we have.
Yes. So when you talk of the flywheel, then it's a case of the two sides of the business being a bit of a virtuous circle where one strengthening the other, and there being a bit of an echo chamber in that sense.
Yeah, because if you imagine, the business is based in Leeds and operating internationally, and Leeds is where I heard somebody refer to it as where executive search began, but there's a considerable concentration of high-level executive recruitment consultants based in our city, operating internationally. So 35 plus companies doing what we do, hundreds of executive recruiters doing what we do, generating, I would estimate, probably 100 million of revenue in that city alone. And in the future, we've got opportunities to expand outside of there. But right now, attracting people into the business who can generate a base level of £200,000 worth of revenue, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 pounds worth of revenue as individuals joining the company, that drives the operating revenue up, making us more attractive to the capital markets and making us more appealing to those investors who are maybe got trapped capital in ISAs and SIPs, or their investment funds who are only allowed to purchase equities and not able to purchase underlying commodities or assets, who are looking for an operating business that grows as a direct result of holding Bitcoin and increasing their Bitcoin balance sheet. But the more individuals join the business and see success in the business, the more individuals they know in their previous companies, and the more the more success the business has, the more it becomes attractive to people to join the business. So it's a virtuous cycle for both sides of the business combined. So our intention and our objective there is to increase revenues, increase cash flows, increase Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And the more we increase revenues and cash flows, the more appealing we are to the capital markets to increase the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. The more we're appealing to the capital markets, the more we're appealing to our direct competitors' highest billing staff. And in the future, we can look at buy and acquire using the leverage of long-dated performance-based share options in the same manner that we attract talent, to attract companies into the group and allow them to use their cash reserves and cash flows to continue strengthening the Bitcoin treasury and the balance sheet side of the business. So we see it as a model that other service-based businesses will probably adopt in 5, 10, 15 years. And the gap and the opportunity is to start that now and get ahead of the game now in order to win that ground in our specific industry and become the market-leading international recruitment firm with a Bitcoin standard balance sheet.
Yeah, so a bit of a long-term network effect. And obviously a big part of that is that Bitcoin-backed bond idea that you recently launched. I mean, in your last interview with us, you said you could see that scaling up alongside the balance sheet and the company. How might that work in practice from here now that that first bond has been issued? Yeah,
we've issued and settled the first bond for 10 Bitcoin. So if the Bitcoin price falls, the conversion price falls with it. So when our shares outperform Bitcoin by 20%, whether Bitcoin's going up, down, or staying flat, we're able to then convert that bond, put that Bitcoin onto the balance sheet. The benefit of that bond for shareholders is that we sell those bonds I'd say, premium to the share price with zero interest and a 12-month maturity with a 2% charge for administrative fees. So there's very little risk to the business and very little risk for the bond buyers. And there's upside for the business, upside for the bond buyers, upside for the shareholders, in that they're designed to increase Bitcoin per share for the shareholders. So when that bond converts, we're able to then issue another tranche, and we may issue a number of tranches, but you could scale them up from the 10 Bitcoin we've started at. You could see a scenario where if the market cap of the business and the multiple of net asset value that the business is at the time, you could scale them up at 20, 30, 40, 50. You can scale them up depending on the scale of the business's market cap and the MNAV and the environment that we're in. And that's the purpose of those bonds. But then we wanted to be certain in our use of those at the first stage that they were aligned with the size of the business right now, and send a message to investors that we intend to scale them with the scale of the business and to drive the scale of the business going forward.
Got you. Yeah. And finally, on Bitcoin itself, I have to ask, because prices have pulled back a little bit recently, do you see that as an opportunity to accumulate, and how are you thinking about the longer term outlook for Bitcoin? I know you're very positive. Yeah,
personally, I've been a Bitcoiner for 10 years now. We're in 2026. So I started my Bitcoin journey in 2016, and it took 4 years as a personal individual to come to a conclusion that this will be a future world reserve asset. And I suppose you come into conclusions along that journey, but feeling the highs and buying throughout the lows and all that kind of stuff as an individual, I think it's quite important as a leader of a business in this space. Because I decided to allocate our balance sheet to Bitcoin in 2021, and the price was at 51,000, and then it went to 61,000, and then it drew all the way back down to 16,000 throughout that 2021 to 2025 period. And we were buying every day or every week throughout that period.
Right.
So we came to the IPO with an average purchase price of 37,500. And I think having that 4-year history behind us gave me the credibility to secure the board that we have and secure the investors that we have.
Yeah.
Because you can't borrow conviction. You have to build it in this asset class. So if you've got 8 years behind you where you've been buying throughout the highs and buying throughout the lows, you quickly come to a conclusion that you just consistently buy over a long period of time. And whilst the asset class is in the early stages of adoption, it was a zero price in 2009. It's now $70,000 per coin. It's limited in supply, it's divisible, it's transportable. These properties have made it appealing to nation states that are now holding it as a reserve asset. It's made it appealing, including the United States Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which has not been spoken about for the last 12 months, but was signed off last year. And if I was building a Strategic Bitcoin Reserve for my country, I probably wouldn't speak about it too much either. You've got major banks. I was in the USA last week with clients, with partners, with investors from this space. We had Morgan Stanley in the room, you had Citibank in the room, you had TD Cohen in the room, and you had Barclays in the room. And those major banks were talking about custody and lending products. They were talking about ETFs. I think Morgan Stanley was saying that they're launching an ETF. And they were, and one of them that's well known in the UK was talking about $100 million plus deals that they've done within the Bitcoin space. But these are US based, and they are, I have to say, a little bit further in front of the UK from an understanding and an embracing of the asset class.
Yeah.
So the bank that's UK based, they weren't surprised when I discussed how that bank kind of views the asset in the UK and the engagement that you would see in the UK. They weren't surprised by that. So I think we've seen all of these things happen, but on a small scale. And it takes a long time for institutions and corporations to put the pipes in place to start building a balance sheet of Bitcoin, or building custodial products, or building lending products, or building ETFs and building financial products around the asset class. But it's happening, and when those pipes are in place, you'll see it reflected in the price. And I think over the long term, Bitcoin will always be worth more in the future than it's been worth in the past. So at the moment, I look at the price and I see it as a discounted price, in my opinion. And I think once it's signed off by the major banks, and once the Clarity Act in the US goes through, and let's say if the US were to begin really publicly purchasing the asset, once all the aspects have been put in place, the price will trend higher.
Yeah.
But those people who've been skeptical, and those people who haven't really looked at the asset class in detail, or bought the asset class, will have a rubber stamp to say, okay, now I'm going to look at the asset class. Now I'm going to study the asset class. And anybody who studies it for 10 hours tends to think it might go wrong. And if they study it for 100 hours, they think this is really good and I'm going to consider trading it. And when they studied it for 1,000 hours or been in it for 4 years, they just say, okay, it's just buy consistently, hold. And at some point in the future, this is going to be pristine collateral. And the businesses that build their balance sheets on that pristine collateral now have an advantage.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you talk about the US being a little bit perhaps ahead of the curve compared to the UK in terms of Bitcoin generally. Was that part of the rationale behind your decision to recently get the company onto the OTC market?
Yes, of course. And there's the Bitcoin Treasury side of it. So we're now able to, like I said, I was in the US speaking to future partners and current partners and clients and investors. And we, of course, want to be over there and we want to build a presence in the US. And that's one of the focuses for the Bitcoin Treasury side of the business. But on the operating side of the business, we've just placed a US director with one of the big four consulting firms over there. We've just placed a US director with an AI intelligence and data firm in the US. We've just placed, I don't want to get this wrong, a European vice president of sales in the US, and a US managing director of a global business advisory firm. So we operate in the US. We're not the biggest executive recruitment firm, but the placements that we make are with people who are influential within their companies and within their divisions. And it just made sense to make sure that we were able to engage with investors in the US as well as clients.
Yeah, and obviously these things take time in terms of building awareness, but you're starting to see a bit of interest coming through from investors already?
There's only so much I can say, Dan, but yeah, I've got a lot of calls to follow up on from the trip to the USA and a lot of discussions to have.
Enough said. I think that says it all. Yeah, finally, you clearly have a lot going on at the moment with the business, and that trading update points to strong momentum across both sides. So looking ahead, what are some of the key milestones that investors should be looking out for over the coming months? Why is now a good time to be paying attention to XCE?
Yeah, I think the milestones that we're looking out for are continuing to drive operational growth, continuing to make revenue generating experience key hires in the operating side of the business. And then on the Bitcoin Treasury side of it, I'll be attending the USA again soon. And we've got plenty of PR relations, conversations and discussions to have in the public arena that we'll be able to share more details about the plans going forward, which in broad scope would be looking at raising the level of Bitcoin on the balance sheet in order to get to a substantially or a reasonable market cap and a reasonable volume. We would then consider the main market or uplisting options that are available to us. And with regard to the Bitcoin Treasury side of the business as well, is just externally that market momentum with the Clarity Act and with the US government's conversations about it, and the banks like Morgan Stanley and Citibank and Barclays, the movements in that space there are likely to, at some point, whether it's this year, whether it's next year, at some point in the future, that's going to drive significant, what would you call it, like a valve for the trapped capital in these markets to access what they want to access, which is a neutral bearer asset that's limited in supply.
Absolutely, yeah. So potentially some big catalysts coming up, both for the business and the wider market.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I look forward to catching up again soon, perhaps when you do release that next update. For now, though, Scott, thank you very much again for your time today.
Great to see you, Dan.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.